Hey guys, how's it going? Sam here and welcome back to the channel. I'm sorry it's been a while, I've been stupidly busy and the one time I go to record the audio I'm a bit sick, so I apologise for my voice in advance. So what am I working on? I've had a few people write in the comments that they'd like to see me develop a whole process rather than just one video of one subject at a time, so I wanted to work on a world building exercise, starting with a 3D block up of a building and then go into a concept design and then go into a final illustration. So this video will just tackle the 3D process. I've tried to keep the camera work as kind of steady as possible. I've edited out a lot, so you might see the content jump a bit. The reason for that is I'm not trying to hide anything, it's just the camera angles change constantly and it will just give you a headache, so I try to keep it kind of minimal to the movement, so I apologise if anything doesn't make sense at any point. Just to say, I'm not a 3D modeler, so I use 3D as part of a 2D process, so a lot of what you're going to see me do is kind of quick and rough and ready. It won't be good enough to go into a game engine. Even if I wanted to, I don't have the knowledge to do that anyway. So if you're wanting to become a 3D modeler and learn how to do it properly to get stuff into a game engine, do not follow my process, because it's not a good one. Follow, you know, a proper 3D modeler for that. But if you're a 2D guy that wants to use 3D in his process to help out, you know, this might be helpful for you. So the idea, I wanted to create a, as I said, a world building exercise. So take a simple concept, start to develop it into a few concept designs, and then create a final illustration. So I was inspired by the buildings from Hong Kong. I've always loved the buildings there. I love how chaotic it can be, and it's quite industrial in some respects. You see a lot of aircon units and pipes, and you know, it's quite gritty at times, and I think it's, if you kind of amplify that, you can create some pretty cool environments, like kind of industrial style worlds. So lately that's what I've been inspired by, and with the 3D process it's really easy to do, so I wanted to see how far I could push that idea. So my idea was to create one building, and the reason for that is that I can duplicate the building and produce several other buildings from the first one. So I wanted to take a modular approach, and again the buildings from Hong Kong really allow me to do that because they tend to be quite square. So as the video series goes on, what you'll see is me duplicate entire buildings and rotate them to use them in different ways so it looks different from one camera perspective. So that means I should develop the 3D model from all angles. So the back, sides and front should all be designed. Now I'm not great at that because I'm a 2D guy. I always view it from one camera angle and just presume that's okay, but if I don't design the back I can't rotate it, or if I do I'm going to have more work later on down the line. So at the minute I am basically using cubes to block out a building. Like I said, because it's modular, because it's square, it's really easy to do in 3D. It doesn't take much time at all. You can add details really quickly. Most of what I do, I'm using the edge loop tool to kind of add geometry, and then using extrude essentially, either in or out. The rest of the time I'm, you know, duplicating cubes, rotating them to kind of create different assets, such as the kind of door is several cubes that I've duplicated and rotated. So yeah, that's what you're going to see a lot of the 3D process. It's really that simple. I genuinely think that the process I have now, you could probably learn in a few days with a 3D software. Obviously there are certain things that I've picked up along the way, how to render that works best for me. I was struggling a few months ago where I don't know if you saw my previous videos where I was complaining about having to cut out each asset so I could work on them in clipping masks as well. A friend of mine, Mark, recommended a object ID pass, so I do that in this. I will actually cover that in the next video more, but silly things like that you pick up as you go, but the actual tools that I'm using you can learn really quickly, and it's more of a kind of working out how to visualize in 3D rather than 2D. For a 2D artist that can be quite tricky at times, but it will actually really help your 2D work as well. It will make you understand you know, volume and perspective, lighting. You'll improve all of those things in your 2D work just by working in 3D. At least That's what I found anyway. So you may actually see a few assets kind of dragged off the corner of the screen that I haven't created. A lot of those are pieces I've created in the past. Like I said, you're building a library, so you can start taking stuff from other projects and bringing them in, which obviously speeds up the process. Also, I downloaded a Kitbash. I'll add a link in the description because I can't remember the guy's name. Really good Kitbash. He obviously lets you use all of his assets. I think I've used maybe one of them in this project. I try not to, because obviously I want to learn myself. I don't just want to use other people's stuff, but if you want to go down the Kitbash route, it's actually a really easy way to throw pieces together. You just run the risk of obviously it looking like someone else's work, which is something I wanted to avoid. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. So yeah, I'm kind of starting off by creating one building, like I said, that will end up becoming several. I'll then arrange those several buildings to create a cityscape that I'll take one render from as a beauty pass and work over that for a final illustration. So I'm trying to create an entire process of initial concept design with several buildings, and then one concept painting of one building, so I get a general idea of how that building looks and how the world will feel, and then an illustration where I'll use the concept painting for reference. So one thing I would say with world building, I've had it in the past, I've been a victim of it myself, where people try to do too much when they're creating a world. So I mean, it's really fun and everyone wants to, you know, go into as much detail as they possibly can, especially at a pre-drawing phase. People will write down loads of ideas and you end up with a process that's, you know all the characters. You've got 150 characters and you know how they all relate, and you know whose aunt's who and who's got an uncle, and you know you go into so much depth with the lore of the world that it becomes this mammoth task. You end up with 6 cities, you know, and it ends up becoming Game of Thrones essentially, and that's good, and people can do it. If you're the kind of person that can stick with a project like that, then great, go for it. From my experience, I've found those people are rare. Most people become put off at some point, or especially if it's your first big project, you'll struggle. You'll come across issues that you didn't know existed. For example, you could write down all the narratives you want, and then as it comes to making the game, it doesn't work visually, and then you're kind of starting again. So a lot of people, they start projects but never finish them, and I've been one of those people. I start a project but never finish it. So with this, I wanted to do it a bit differently. I didn't want to create a big world. I didn't want to go into big narrative elements. I wanted to come up with a small concept, such as how would a world look if it was industrial, if you know, there's this cityscape. Maybe I can start to develop how characters would work in those buildings. You know, and as I'm making the 3D model, I start to think about narrative elements, as in why do they live this way? As an example, it's quite gritty and things are broken and things are all over the place. So that suggests that people don't have the time to fix it. They're kind of living almost in a slum. As an example, they're kind of like broken roofs in my buildings. You know, if the world was affluent, that wouldn't happen. So it kind of adds little narrative suggestions, and that's the way I would try to work. Try to start very small, take a small concept, and do something like I'm doing, go from an initial concept and then to a final illustration. And if you love the world that you produced with that and you want to carry on, then great, you can do that, and you can, you know, start to develop it from there. If you've done one city, you can start to develop another one, and before you know it, you end up with a big world. But I would recommend starting small. It's bite-sized chunks, really make it easier to get going. It kind of clears your mind a little bit more. It focuses you on one task rather than you know, trying to design an entire world. So that would be my recommendation. Obviously, let me know in the comments if you disagree with that. If you think you're better off designing everything first, then great, I'd love to hear your thoughts and why you think that is. So the 3D model that I'm producing now, time-wise, took me, I would say around between half a day and a day. I did it across several days, but in a few hours here and there. I'm not a particularly fast 3D modeler. I'm getting better, but it still takes me longer than a painting would. But I then produced, I think, 8 buildings from this first one, and I did all of them in a couple of hours because I could duplicate, rotate, move assets, and I've already got a kind of visual library there that I can just move over. So when it came to producing the landscape, which I'll obviously cover in another video, I produced the 3D model in, about an hour. And when you see it, it doesn't look like an hour's work. So there are huge benefits of 3D. I've mentioned it before on the channel. Being able to duplicate assets, for me, it's such a good thing. It's such a time saver. So yeah, that's kind of how long it took. So I think the main issue with 3D for me currently is the fact that I produce the 3D models in a certain way because my skill set limits me. So because I'm using basic geometric forms, things end up being quite blocky, and they end up going down a slightly more realistic route. Now that changes when you start painting, but yeah, they kind of, because of the nature of how 3D renders, and because of the way I produce them, I don't create it in a stylized manner how I might with a painting. So it slightly forces my hand, I find, with style. Now that will change obviously as I improve as a 3D modeler. It's not set in stone, but that's an issue I've come across so far. The work looks a certain way when I produce it in 3D. So that is one negative. So I think it'd be interesting for me to try and produce this kind of piece just in 2D, but I would tackle it so differently. Because I don't have the luxury of duplicating assets, I think things will be simpler, which again might not be an issue, might be something to look into. But yeah, that's kind of where I am with the 3D at the minute. I find it really useful. I can't ever imagine ever not using it now for certain projects. It lends itself to these kind of designs. Like I said, it's so quick, so easy. So that is why I've used 3D up to this point. I really recommend it if you haven't. I was actually talking to someone about it the other day, and I never, I've been painting digitally for a long time, but I never used 3D. I always found it a bit scary, a bit daunting. But now that I know what I know, I can't believe I never used it. It's really easy. Like I said, the things I've learned, you can learn in a week easily, if you know what you're looking for. And it's such a time saver. So, and the results just are better most of the time. So, if you haven't used 3D yet, I really recommend it. Like I said, it'll help you, even if you don't use it in your process, it'll help your 2D knowledge. So it's definitely worth trying out. So to talk a little bit about my thought processes with the 3D model. Like I said, I wanted to be quite industrial, so you can see I'm adding a lot of pipes. I've added a water tank, which was inspired from kind of New York buildings. I've always loved them, so I wanted to kind of get that in there. But again, it suggests a narrative element. When I see those water tanks, I always presume they're either abandoned or people aren't getting regular water. So you imagine these big tanks kind of being filled, and then that being the water supply for, that entire building. So it kind of, again, adds a little narrative element of, are these people, if they're not being looked after properly, if it is a bit of a slum, especially if that water tank's really rusty and horrible, it gives you a kind of opinion on the building, adds a little extra narrative element. So something with the 3D, I didn't want to keep it just modular with squares because it looks a bit dull. So you can see on the end, on the left hand side, I've extended the roof out, so you've got that kind of this under walkway passage bit. I was actually imagining this to be almost like a car garage. So you'd have vehicles under there, being maybe a futuristic city. You could have a spaceship sitting under there, something like that. Again, adds a narrative element. I wanted the buildings to look like they had a history and look like they had a purpose. So I didn't just want to create a door and some windows. I added, tanks on the side of the building with pipes running to them. Maybe that could be gas or water. I added, kind of these large doors on the front, as if, big vehicles might be able to drive through on the bottom floor. I've added elements where it kind of breaks out of the form. So there's, a big cube of windows sticking out the side of the building, as if someone's added that on themselves. So I really wanted to make it feel like it was lived in, and it wasn't perfect. which I think I've achieved actually. I think I've done pretty well with that, and when you see the full amount of buildings I've created, you see that more. You see a kind of experimentation of, you know, adding different elements and how I've made each building look different. So with the final render, which you're going to see pretty soon, I create a ambient occlusion render. Now obviously you can do that at any quality you like. The reason I do that is obviously it gives you kind of these soft shadows, which is really useful for 2D because you can add any kind of shadow you want. But then I add another render pass of a direct light, which gives you a hard shadow. I take those both into Photoshop and reduce the hard light shadow over the top of the ambient occlusion to give me a kind of softer render pass, which gives me basically all the information I need for lighting. Now in the future I would like to start to work out how to add textures. Now obviously you need to tend to do UVs. Now the way I've built my 3D models, that I just don't think that's possible because of how bad my modelling is. So I might have to start cleaning up models to do that. If that is the case, I won't bother because it's easy to whack in textures in 2D. So yeah, this is the final render. As you can see, I've got the directional lighting over the top of an ambient occlusion. And you're just about to see the rest of the models that I've produced from them. So as you can see, I think they look quite different. I've got even more than what I'm showing you here now actually, because it is so easy to duplicate assets and move them around. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this video. It's a little bit more in depth on my 3D. Like I said, I don't have much experience with 3D, so I apologise if I was just blabbering my way through this video. But I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you use 3D software? Have I kind of encouraged you to do so? Do you use it differently to me? Is there anything really obvious that you think I'm doing wrong or doing right? I'd love to hear your thoughts. So thanks guys. Stay tuned for the other videos. Obviously the next one I'll be doing is painting one of these buildings, and after that I'll be doing an illustration. So if you want to see those videos, subscribe and ideally hit the notification bell, because I don't release videos very often. You just won't see them come up in your feed when I release them. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed it. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I'll catch you in the next one.